Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Innu, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. On the panel with me today, joining via Zoom, is Mr. Kent Seelan and Miss Diane Knight. And our assessor today is Jamie Fougere. Our administrative person is Miss Phoebe Graywood. My name is Bill Moretsky, also joining via Zoom. I am also on the panel and will be chairing this meeting. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. Makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony, followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony, followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all of the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decision. You will receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. We will be hearing items 1 and 2 on our docket today. Ms. Grayward, can you please affirm the assessors and the applicant for the first item's testimony?
Mr. Fougere, please state your full name.
Jamie Fougere.
Do you affirm the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your full name.
Trevor Smith.
Do you affirm the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Thanks.
Please state.
Okay, our first item number 1 on the docket, 830 Century Street. This is an application for revision of the amount of the assessed value. I believe we have a non-co-op request, Mr. Fougere.
Yes, so we have a couple of preliminary issues here. We originally had in the brief the request for the penalties to be applied for the non-cooperation. However, after some research and some tracking down of 311 inquiries, I was able to learn that they did in fact contact our department regarding their move, basically from across the street into this newly built unit here. And that unfortunately, the due diligence on our behalf wasn't taken to update their mailing address or to uncover that indeed they were changing the mailing address as well with the move. So for those reasons, we're going to withdraw the non-cooperation, the request for non-cooperation penalties. Then the second thing that I wanted to bring up was that I do have a recommendation for this property that I've sent this morning. So I just wanted to make sure that the panel has that. And I understand in cases where the recommendation was received after the exchange date, that the panel has been sort of deciding whether to accept it or not.
I haven't got it here yet.
Should be the
It's there
third.
now.
It should be the third item under item 1.
Yeah.
If you don't see it, maybe try refreshing.
Oh, okay. It's actually the second item.
Oh, sorry, yes, it is.
Okay, I'm there. Well, you could have also made a verbal recommendation, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, well, I don't see the need for any consideration outside of the hearing by the panel on this. So we'll accept it.
Sounds good. Okay, so
You can, yeah, if you can read it in and then get to your recommendation, and we'll take it from there.
sure. So the roll number here is 07569137005. This is 830 Century Street. The original 2025 assessment was 9,334,000. And then our recommendation that we have here, you can see the original assessment broken down on the left-hand side. And then you can see our proposed recommendation on the right-hand side. And I'm just going to draw your attention to a couple of things that have changed. So this is a newly constructed sort of retail warehouse type of space. In reality, what that means here is there is a retail area at the front. There's a storage area, and then I believe on the second floor is office space. And so you can see the retail warehouse area is 12,508 square feet. I've applied a rate to recognize that that space isn't as valuable as the retail portion at the front. And then I've also adjusted the capitalization rate to 6.25 to bring it more in line with our outside sources. And again, sorry, I should just say the total for value here is 7,951,000 is our proposed recommendation.
And Mr. Smith, how do you feel about the recommendation?
I haven't had the opportunity to consult with the client with regard to the recommendation, so I can't really accept it on their behalf. Beyond that, we do have a couple of significant differences.
Okay, Mr. Fougere, then you can continue with the entirety of your presentation then.
Sure. So you can, let's see here. Just going to be one moment here. Yeah, unfortunately, I have neglected photographs of this property. I do apologize. Normally, I would have pictures of the property on the second page. I'm not sure how I missed that, and I do apologize. You will be able to have a chance to see the property in the applicant's submission. It's a building, as mentioned, on Century, just sort of just behind the property that is on Wellington, I believe. And it is a new retail location that has large windows in the front, large parking on the side, as well as a loading dock at the rear. And just coming back to it here. And the business here is Urban Tactical. And so if you want to turn to the second page of my brief, we have a sale of the property, which is basically land value from 2019 for $1,300,000. And I just want to point out as well, through review of the permits, it's noted that the total construction cost to the project was $6 million. So when you add the $1,300,000 of the land value to the $6 million in construction value, you get approximately $7,300,000. And as you recall, with my recommendation, we're looking for $7,951,000. The building was completed in 2021, and of course, we're looking at 2025. So that's in part my explanation as to why we would be higher than the construction value. And then you can see on page 3 of my brief, we have large retail warehouses that are generally of newer construction, not I wouldn't say new, but I would say newer, as in, we're looking at, in some cases here with my comparables, about 20 years old. We have some here on Empress that are 2012, and then 875 St. James, 2013. So these are just to give you a flavor of more recent construction the large spaces that these tenants would occupy, and the rental range that they go for. So we're looking at between $14 on the lower side up to $20. And the blended rate for my recommendation we're looking at is $13.90. So those are my rent comparables. And if you want to turn to page 6 of my brief, we have the capitalization rate table. It's difficult to categorize where you would put this property within the table. I would suggest either sort of a lower quality neighborhood shopping center, or strip mall would probably be sort of the closest categories that we have. And you can see those in about the middle of the page. The outside sources for Colliers are 6 to 7. CBRE, we're looking at 6 to 7 as well. And then for Cushman and Wakefield, we're looking at 6.5 to 7.5. But then with the city of Winnipeg, we're looking at as low as 5.6 for the strip mall, and as high as 7% for the neighborhood shopping center. So I feel with this being new construction, a nice building, 6.25 would be reasonable. So that's my presentation.
Mr. Smith, do you have any questions on the assessor's presentation?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a few, yes. So Jamie, you had brought up the issue of permits and the total permit cost of $6 million, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so the city is aware that the cost to construct does not directly translate to market value, correct?
Correct. It is one of the approaches to value. So it's another thing that I think should be considered. I think appropriate weight should be put on it. However, when the cost approach is generally more applicable, is more near the new construction of a property, as opposed to 20 years in, 40 years in, when depreciation and obsolescence have to be factored in. That can complicate the cost approach for sure.
Right. So just on that note, then the city is aware, of course, that when a property is developed, the owner developer takes on construction loans and then ultimately finances that cost of construction over a long period of time, which obviously factors into how the return that they receive, correct? So that cost is spread out over a very significant amount of time, which essentially makes the initial cost to construct not irrelevant, but it doesn't equate one-to-one to value, correct? In that $6 million of construction cost does not equate to $6 million in market value.
Not necessarily.
Okay, thank you. And then I'll limit my questions here. So we really have, I think, three real points of contention. We do have a gap in the areas of the individual components. We have a gap in the appropriate net rental rate to apply to the retail component. And then we have a small difference in capitalization rate. So I'll limit my questions to those. With regard to the the differences in measurement. So this property has been under appeal numerous times since its construction. It received a couple of supplemental assessments, etc. And at that time, we presented the finished building plans to the city at that point with the actual measurements for each individual area. Was that taken into account in the department? It doesn't appear to have been changed since that time.
I have not updated the measurements myself. Typically, what we use would be BOMA standards based off of the construction drawings. I would entertain alternate measurements, though I have not yet done so here in my recommendation.
Okay, thank you. And I didn't mean that it should be you that was responsible for it. What I can do is resubmit them following the hearing so that you have that information available to you again. Or it's probably in your database if you still have the original brief. I'll cover that off when we come to it. The main point of contention, I think, probably surrounds the appropriate rental rate to apply to the retail component of the property. So the model has applied $17.92 per square foot. Would that be largely impacted by the age of construction, it being a newly built facility?
Yeah, the age of the construction, the fact that it's retail space for that part of the building, the area of the city that's in, those would be sort of the main drivers of it.
Okay, and in your experience, is location typically more of a factor with regard to the rental rates achieved versus the age of the structure? If you have a superior location versus an off-center type of location?
I think that's difficult to quantify specifically without looking at specific examples and trying to make that determination. Even with specific examples, I think it could be difficult to say which one is contributing more to the rental rate that's resulting without having looked at the underlying data and the analytic numbers that sort of extract that information. But
okay. Sorry,
but
can you cut you off?
sorry, no, I was just going to say, but this, being new construction is certainly a very strong positive in terms of location. This isn't too far from sort of the outer impact of sort of the Polo Park area. Obviously further out on the fringes than some of the stuff that directly would benefit from Polo Park itself. But just in terms of the area, there are a lot of large, furniture stores that are older, as well as a lot of sort of big box retail that are newer as well.
Okay, let's look at your page number 3 then, if we could, the rent comparables. So I did take a quick run through these, and so when I look at the addresses, if we could just go through these quickly. So the first one I think is a Lazy Boy location, 1425 Ellis. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then
You know what? I should, excuse me, sorry to interrupt you there,
Mhm.
Mr. Smith. I would request that maybe we speak in more general terms than naming the tenants, just for privacy.
Fair enough. So when I look down this list, for the most part, we're looking at locations that are immediately adjacent to Polo Park, as in across the street, not down the street, but across the street, and or on the site of Polo Park itself. Is that fair to say?
I'm not sure about on the site itself of Polo Park, but generally, to your point, I would say that they are in sort of invisibility from Polo Park, and the reason why is because I was looking for newer construction in the area, because you know, a furniture store that is sort of poor construction, older, and does not have sort of the modern look and amenities of newer construction, is in my opinion not as comparable as these are.
Okay, just on that original note, and 600 Empress would be actually on the site of Polo Park, correct? I've checked, it is. And I'm not trying to put you on the spot, I just want to confirm details here.
Sure.
Okay. And the types of tenants, and not referring specifically to any one individual listing here, but we're looking at your Canadian Tires, Winners, Home Sense, Marks, Marshalls, Bed Bath and Beyond, Best Buy. These are the types of national tenants with good covenants that we're looking at.
Yes, I would agree with that in general terms. And in terms of the Empress site, just to be clear, it's technically not part of the Polo Park roll number. It's just immediately to the north. It's sort of the new construction that runs alongside Silver City to the west, and has Jack Blick sort of between it and Polo Park, and then Empress on the east side, if that helps.
Right, no, that's a good description. So it's immediately beside the Silver City, which is immediately across the parkade from Polo Park, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then just finally, capitalization rates, so page number 6. So you had indicated it's probably, if you looked at it as a lower quality neighborhood facility or retail categorization within the city's parameters, that was, I think, what you had indicated.
Correct.
Okay. And then the range that the market brokerages quote is generally 6 to 7.5%, correct?
Right.
Okay. Those are all of my questions. Thank you.
Mr. Seelan, any questions for the assessor?
Yes, have you inspected this property?
I have not.
Can you go back into some detail on why you lowered and why you came up with this recommendation for a different amount?
Yeah. So, I do think our original capitalization rate was on the stronger side, and there's been some speculation as to why that was at the time that our capitalization rates were coming out so low. So I think 6.25 though brings it towards basically the lower quarter or so of the range for the outside sources, and sort of between the middle or so for the city of Winnipeg parameters or analysis that we have for capitalization rates. This is new construction. I do regret not having the pictures in my brief, but you will see them with the applicant's presentation. It's a nice building. It's a new construction. It's a large building on a large site. There's a little bit of room at the back of the site. I would suggest that it is a desirable building in a desirable location. That's why I haven't gone further in my reduction based on capitalization rate. In terms of the rental rate for the warehouse space at the rear, it is a large component that they have for storage, basically. I would suggest from what I have observed with retail warehouses or kind of big box kind of stores, that you don't typically have such a large area that's just for overstock and warehousing purposes. So I thought that was fair to sort of draw that out and have it more based on the lower end, I would suggest, of sort of some of these older furniture warehouse type of properties in the area. So 950 I believed was fair. Looking towards the permit value with the sale price gave me a little bit of confidence. Not that I wanted to specifically hang my hat on a cost approach, but that it is not showing us something wildly different in terms of the value that has gone into creating the property. So another a theory in appraisal practices is that with all things being equal, if one area, say you have a site where you can build or you can buy a competing property, they sort of help inform each other, those two decisions, because ultimately a developer would have to make the decision, should we construct new here or should we try to buy a building? And ultimately, I believe if the building is not very old, it would be of similar value to construct new. Otherwise, if it was so cost prohibitive, I would suggest that anybody wanting to develop property or open a business at a property would be better off to buy another newer retail warehouse type of building if it would be significantly cheaper. So it's sort of the theory of substitution. So if you have the two options, you would have to be competitive to choose to build new over buying an existing building, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you. That's all my questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Knight, any questions for the assessor?
My question was asked and answered. Thanks.
Okay. construction cost of $6 million that you had mentioned, Mr. Fougere, is there any document in your presentation that 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 outlines that in any fashion?
No, it's just my verbal evidence based on reviewing the permits here.
And of course, you don't have any actual income and expense with your presentation as well,
Correct.
yeah, for obvious reasons. Um, okay. So we got it's mentioning a wall height of 28 feet on this. Is that correct?
That I think that would be correct. Yeah.
Is
Uh,
it
y-
that is it that much? It just strikes me as high for just a retail
yeah,
warehouse.
I believe it is that high. I believe there is a second floor to the property, and so that's sort of open kind of uh open area, kind of vaulted ceilings over the retail portion, and then towards the side and the rear, there's offices on the second floor, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just thinking of just your basic retail, like a Walmart, for instance, is that a 28-foot high roof? I'm not,
Probably around 22 or something like that,
yeah,
between 18 and 22.
right, right. That's what it strikes me as, a little bit higher than your regular retail, I guess. Um, there's no photos of the comparables you have as well, is there?
No,
They were available. Okay.
I would agree with Mr. Smith's understanding of my comparables as generally being newer, big box within sort of the kind of immediate vicinity of Polo Park.
Okay. I have no further questions then. So, Mr. Smith, you may begin your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So subject property that we're dealing with, 830 Century. The owner of the property, occupants of the property is, well, their formal name is on the city's brief there, but it is a business called Urban Tactical, and they're essentially a protection gear and outdoor specific outdoor gear type of retailer. They're an online retailer for the most part. This is their head office. They started here in Winnipeg, and this is their sole location as far as having any kind of display space for their products. So they started across the street, which is where the confusion came in with the city with regard to the mailing address. They were at an older facility on the other side of Century Street at 891 Century. Their business did well online, so they needed expansion space in order to accommodate all of their employees, all of the needs for their increased office space requirements with the online presence, and then obviously storage with regard to warehouse. So looking at their purchase and development of the site, they were looking to keep their costs low essentially, but accommodate all of their needs in one space. So on the other side of the street, there was a vacant lot that had been vacant for I don't actually know how long, but a very long time, immediately located behind where the Best Western Winnipeg Airport location was developed on the corner of Wellington and and Century Street. So vacant lot, it was there for ages. They were able to pick it up at a somewhat reasonable amount at 1.3 million and facilitated their move quite easily. So they built the structure specifically for themselves. They needed to accommodate their office requirement, which was quite significant, as well as their warehousing component. And it made sense to have a bit of a retail warehouse display space on the front. So that was the thought in designing it. There are actually 2 floors of office space. So I will get you to flip to my page number 8. Everybody's there.
Yep.
So if you look at the right-hand side of the photo there, that is Century Street. And the front component of that is obviously the retail warehouse, retail showroom type of space. The middle section of the building on both floors is office space. It has a separate entrance on the south side of the building. And the rear of the building is the warehouse space. So that's the reason for the 28 feet. They had to accommodate 2 floors of office space. Obviously, it gives you a bit more height in the warehouse, and you're not going to have 2 different roof heights for a brand new building. So the front space is also obviously of the same height. Flip to page 9 there, right beside that. And you can see the location. So location here is absolutely critical to the valuation that we're putting on this property. The rental rate that is applied to the retail warehouse here is the main point of contention. So if you look at the map at the top of page number 9, our newly constructed building is located on Route 90 north of Wellington again. So if you see the red dot there, it's on the west side of Century. Now, where's the retail that we're referring to in the city's brief? Well, for the most part, nearly exclusively, it's clustered immediately around the Polo Park site. So if you go down in that map, you can obviously see where Polo Park is located. And all of those comps are typically on St. James Street up to St. Matthews, roughly on the northern end of what I would refer to as the Polo Park site itself, where the former Winnipeg Arena was, and or on Empress on the other side. So they're clustered in and around. They're also big box stores. The point of having big box stores clustered together in a power center node such as that is it drives more business for the retailers. So the developers, when they build them, they approach all of the big box stores. They get them interested in that site for obvious reasons, being around Polo Park, and they're able to drive significantly more rent from those retailers, as the retailers know that they will get more business by being located along with other big box retailers immediately across from Polo Park than they will in a substandard location such as where the property itself that we're dealing with is located. So location is critical. If the property is built in 2021 versus 2012 or something of that nature, or earlier for that matter, and one is located by Polo Park and one is where the subject is, there's going to be a dramatic difference in the rent that a tenant would be willing to pay to locate there. If you look at the bottom of the page, and I trust we've all been down Route 90 there, Century, and you recall what the surrounding area is like. It's not a retail area. Are there perhaps some older distribution type of quasi retail locations there? Yes, there are, but they're not they're not big box retail. They don't drive rental rates that you would see along St. James Street or Empress, etc. So the bottom of the page gives you an indication of what that area is like. So that is why they're located there. As a retail tenant out in the marketplace, it's not a location that you would choose as your first and or second choice, probably with regard to location. Is it new? Yes, it's new. Location is the critical component here with regard to the rental rate. Let's flip quickly through my brief. We don't have a lot of points of contention, so I'll probably only touch on the highlights here. Page number 3, you can see the appeal history for the subject property. 2022 supplemental, 2024 was appealed, received a reduction and is now under appeal at the municipal board. The site area is shown there, 1.9 acres, and at the bottom you can see the actual breakout of the individual components. So these are taken from the finished plans for the building. They were submitted to the city, and as Mr. Fougere mentioned, he didn't have the opportunity himself to view those, so I understand the gap there, but the detail is in the city's hands, so we will endeavor to resubmit that to them. However, you can see the differences. Our retail area, the actuals, and brand new building, so it's obviously been closely measured. The retail is 9,239 square feet versus the city's 10,376 square feet. So the retail is actually slightly smaller as well. The office is a little bit bigger, 17,445 square feet versus 16,293 square feet. So that's really where the difference is. And then the warehouse is virtually bang on 12,508, 12,507. So that is the actual space for the building, 39,191. Ever so slightly bigger than the city's number. Photographs of the BIP property begin on the next page. Obviously, it's new construction. If you look at the bottom of page 4, you can see the south side of the building and the entrance to the office area. Again, that's 2 floors. Page 5 gives you an overview of the retail floor. So it's just polished flooring, open steel frame, display space essentially. And you have the office on the next page and the warehouse and the loading at the rear of the property. Page number 8 gives you the site. There's no real expansion space. It's simply loading at the back of the site off of Bradford. So that is the property we're looking at. We should get into the value itself. Again, I will try and focus on the retail as our other differences are relatively minor. Properties owner occupied, no lease in place, obviously. So we've given you retail comparables on page number 12. Now, keep in mind that it is critical with regard to applying appropriate rental rate to the subject to look at the location of the comps that are provided. So I've given you a fairly wide range here. And the subject property is most certainly an off-center type of retail location. It wouldn't be a first or second choice for a retailer typically. So we need to look at locations that would be somewhat similar to that. I'll point you to a couple of comparables here. That will have some obvious differences that we'll explain, but will be informative with regard to appropriate rental rate. So the first one being number 3, 1340 Sargent. This is located on the corner of a photograph of it here. It is in between Empress and St. James on Sargent, so significantly north of the Polo Park site. This is 20,000 square feet, so somewhat similar in size to the subject. Built in 1969, so obviously older, but we have a lease there for $11 per square foot. And it's, again, a similar type of space in that it is that quasi retail warehouse type of space for a business interiors firm. And we move on to numbers 4 and 5. This is 1250 St. James Street. Now, 1250 St. James Street is the closest in proximity to the subject property. Now, 1250 St. James is essentially one block to the east of the subject, again, north of Wellington on the west-hand side. So we're looking at 22 and 23,000 square feet. And we're looking at long-term leases at rates of $12.90 and $11.75 per square foot. Built in 99, high cube warehouse, good visibility on St. James, but well north of the Polo Park area. So 1175, 1290, these being the brick and flying squirrel. I'll also point you to number 10, this being 1300 Ellis. Again, a somewhat off-center location with regard to retail and a type of retail warehouse display space. It's an electronics firm. Recent lease there in 2019 at $12.50 a square foot for 8,000 square feet. So closer in size to the actual nine plus thousand square feet of the retail area of the subject. That particular property is shown on my page number 20. You can see that while it is in the Polo Park area, it is located again to the north, just south of, it's on Ellis, fronts on Ellis, but it's located to the east of Empress and to the east of the neighboring street to the east of Empress as well. So it is off center again from the main development node there. I've given you photographs and maps of each of these comparables. Again, if you go through them, you can see the ranges of values. I'll point to, I think, one that we have in common here, 1000 St. James. This being a 2021 lease for Ashley Home Store at $15 a square foot. Good location. They're achieving $15 per square foot there. The subject will fall certainly below that in terms of desirability for a tenant. The remainder of the property, the comparables are there for you to see. They are good quality. Some of them are certainly new and in power center nodes such as 1715 Keniston, 2020 lease at $12 a square foot for a national tenant at 8,300 square feet. So you can see, and that I believe was a corner spot kind of at the back of one of the developments in and around Keniston, kind of at the, not one of the more desirable spaces in that particular development. So what I'm pointing out to you here is that the rental rates that are out there in the marketplace for comparable, again, off-center type of locations are in that 11 to, well, I think 15 was the max that I pointed out here, which again would be superior to the subject property. But again, typically in that 11 to 1350 per square foot type of range. The photos and maps are there for you on the following pages. I will run through each of those. That's for you to see. We get to my office comparables on page number 25. I've assigned a rate of $14.50. The city's at $14.72. I will leave that up to your discretion. You can see the comps that I've provided. They're well located. Feel free to ask any questions you wish about those. The warehouse, we're in agreement on the rental rate. That is on my page 34, so I won't run through that detail. And then we summarize our revenue stream in the chart on page 34. So the actual office area, 17,445, at a rate of $14.50 gives us the resultant annual income. Warehouse actual measurement at $9.50, same as the subject, or rather as the city. And then most critically, the actual area for the retail, which is smaller than the city's area, 9,239 square feet, at a rate of $13.50 per square foot. We believe this is the upper end of what you would achieve in that area and does reflect both the location and the newness of the property. There is no surrounding retail to support a standalone type of retail development here. So that is the background with regard to the rent. We can skip over the vacancy and expense issue as we are in agreement on those components and move into capitalization rate. So if you look at my page 37, we've given you our retail cap rate study. These are, while obviously different than the subject property, these are indicative of what is being paid by astute investors in the market leading up to the valuation date. These are all well-located strip malls in the city of Winnipeg, and our cap rate range is essentially running from 6.3 up to 7.5% for the most part. I've given you photographs of each of these properties on the following page. And as you can see, the bottom end of that is essentially 6.3, 6.5%. Age is only one component, obviously, in selecting the capitalization rate. Location, certainly critical. I'm taking into account the fact that this also has office and warehouse, but you need to look at that from a different perspective as well. If you were an investor and buying this property, well, what are you buying? You're buying a specific use property that was built for this this owner occupant. Are you going to get one tenant to occupy the whole thing? Probably not. So you're going to need a retail tenant. You're going to need an office tenant or two potentially, and you're going to need a warehouse tenant. So it's a very different animal. We've also presented commercial brokerage ranges, again, 6.5 to 7.5% capitalization rate range from Cushman and Wakefield for non-anchored retail strip malls, and Collier's having the same cap rate range, 6.5 to 7.5%. We've also given you office capitalization rate ranges. Now we are, this is suburban office here. Is it new? Yes. Is it specifically an office building? No, it's not. So you're not going to drive the lowest end of the range simply because it's a new facility. It's a office, warehouse, retail. So you can see the ranges from the major brokerages as indicated on page number 40. Suburban ranging from a low of 6% up to a high of 8%, and you can see what each of them assign to that. We've given you our cap rate study at the bottom. Again, well-located office transactions within the market, and you can see they range from a low of 6.5 up to 8.7%. Happy to answer questions if you wish. There are also photos of those transactions there for you. And finally, industrial cap rate ranges on my page number 44. The Collier's cap rate range for that is again 6 to 7% for industrial class B, 5.75 to 6.5 for Class A. Now, that is for strictly industrial, and Class A would be beyond what the subject is, given the size and location, access, etc. It's not a standalone industrial property. Our industrial caps are also shown there for you on page 44, ranging from 6.6% up to 7.4%, all for investment properties with solid tenancy in the city. So again, there are photos and maps of those transactions for you, and we can move forward to my summary on page number 50. Now, my summary of our valuation is on the left-hand side versus the city's on the right. The total potential rent using the actual areas and the rates that we assign to it comes to $496,496. This gives you an average rate of $12.67 for the property. And we're in agreement with the remainder of the parameters outside of cap rate, which we have used 6.5% based on all of the detail that we just presented to you. So slightly higher than the city's revised cap, and reflective of the type of property that you would be acquiring as an investor, including the location, the split nature of the building itself, and ultimately, as I've mentioned in every presentation I've had here, we're also looking at a valuation date where interest rates had risen dramatically over the past year from a historic lows of 0.5% up to 4.75% as of the valuation date. Now, that directly affects mortgage lending rates. As mortgage lending rates go up, your cost to borrow also increases. Cost to borrow and operate that property, pay for that property. And as your costs to increase, obviously your return on that property decreases. So as an astute investor, you're going to protect your return. So you would be willing to pay less for that property, which would increase the capitalization rate for the property. It's a direct correlation. If you go back in history and look at interest rates and lending rates, there's a direct correlation. So we've applied 6.5%, and this gives us our final value of $6,956,000. Again, we're using the actual measured areas. We have a difference in rental rate for the retail, and we cap it at 6.5%. I've given you in the addenda the Board of Revision decision for the supplemental that we had for the subject property as well for your information. That is my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fougere, any questions on the applicant's presentation?
No, thank you.
Ms. Knight, any questions?
No, sir.
Mr. Seelan, any questions?
Yes, have you recently inspected this location?
I have the photographs are mine.
Thank you. That's all my questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay, page 3. Oh. 2024 assessment. Appeal to municipal board. Are you aware, is that the owner appeal or city appeal?
It was our appeal on behalf of the owner.
Okay. Your comparables, rent comparables are on page. If you can help me out there, they're quicker.
Page 12.
Well, there we go. 1340 Sargent. You highlighted that one. The net rent is $11 per square foot. The start date of that lease is 2015. It doesn't mention step up in there. So that is a almost would be a 8-year old rent rate, kind of, I guess, that way. What's your comment on that?
Yes, I comment on that. I included it because of, well, because of the nature of, the space itself. It is that retail warehouse type of display space. And the location being somewhat similar and being an off-center close to Polo Park, but not in Polo Park vicinity. The rate of $11 struck in 2015, yes, they had a lease rate for, or rather a term of 9+ years. There may have been steps in that, so it may be slightly higher than that now. I don't unfortunately have access to the lease at this point in time, so it may be marginally higher than that, but it is informative of the area. When I look back at the city's leases as well, we have some from 2013, 2016, 2017 as well.
Okay. And did you have access to the actual income and expenses on this property?
It wasn't, as Mr. Fougere had noted, they never received the income and expense questionnaire, so they didn't have it completed and submitted to the city. No. But the income would be, I mean, it's all book rent anyway if they have that on the books.
Okay, but you didn't have access to it.
No, I did not.
Okay, I have no further questions.
Thank you for your time, everyone.
Mr. Fougere, do you have anything in summation?
No. Just to consider the proposed recommendation that I've presented.
Mr. Smith, any question, any summation, sorry?
No, that's fine. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much for your presentations, gentlemen. And that then concludes item number 1, 830 Century Street. Okay. We could go for a break recess until 10:15. Okay. Yeah, I call the meeting back to order. The next item of property on the docket is item number 2, 450 Portage Avenue. Ms. Graywood, can you please swear in the applicant for this property?
Mr. Newman, please stand.
Mark Newman.
Do you affirm the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, this is an application for revision of the amount of the assessed value. Mr. Fougere, can you please begin your presentation on this property?
Sure. So the roll number is 12091532500. It's 450 Portage Avenue. Unfortunately, again, here I have not placed the photographs in my brief. I do apologize. This is the Bay Building on Portage Avenue, the corner of Portage Avenue and Memorial Boulevard. So it's a historic building with a heritage designation. So I'm going to walk you through our valuation here in a moment. I do want to say up front, though, I am seeking a confirmation here. And I would request that on the basis that I believe through discussions of our positions, depending on how the outcome of today's hearing goes, either the applicant or the city are going to be appealing the order to the municipal board. And that will give us a more fulsome discussion. As well, some of the other reasons why I would like to do so would be I've just received some information regarding the transfer of the land that I would like to review a bit further, as well as a number of issues that surround the property that we'll go into a little bit throughout. There are at least a couple of appraisals that have been cited. Construction has just begun to transform the building. And the owners, the new owners of the building, the Southern Chiefs Organization Reconciliation Foundation, is actually a charitable organization. So I haven't reviewed what that might mean for the liability of the property as well. So there's a number of questions that are still sort of up in the air from our perspective. And I think given that I don't think I think this would be going further to the municipal board regardless. I think it would be prudent to probably seek confirmation on that basis and then have that more fulsome discussion as information gets collected and we have a more a larger venue, so to speak, to discuss the valuation. So having said that, I did just want to quickly go through what we have now. As mentioned, it's been transferred to the Southern Chiefs Organization Reconciliation Foundation for redevelopment into housing, I believe an art gallery space, and a number of other things, but primarily housing. And it will need to undergo significant renovations. My understanding is they've secured, the SEO has secured upwards to 100 million ballpark in funding from the federal government and the provincial government, as well as several other grants. So for the purposes of this assessment cycle, we have looked at this property on the basis of land value, because in the current state, while it may be true that the Bay could continue operations had they not deemed it not worth their while in terms of their revenue as a business, they would have had the opportunity to continue running it since the requirements for the updates for the renovations are on the basis that there would be a new tenant going in. So if it was still the same tenant, they would not require the renovations. Now that they have decided that it's not in their financial best interest to keep running their business there, they have transferred it to the SEO, as I've mentioned. And now that it's changed hands and new tenants will need to be going in, significant renovations up to 100,000+ would be required to update the building. Now, my understanding of what the value would be once those renovations have gone through and have been completed, would be that it would be more in the scale of I wouldn't want to speculate on the value, but more in the scale of the costs of the renovations. Right now, without those renovations, basically, we'll see a little bit later in the presentation that essentially what's left of the building is the foundation and the structure itself. And then obviously the land that it sits on. It is, as mentioned, a heritage designated building. So that means the building can't come down, but it does still allow for renovations. So we've looked at it just in terms of land. We haven't made any adjustments for what it might cost to deconstruct the building, nor have we looked at what any value in terms of historic value or collector value or even repurposing value of those materials might be. We've just looked at the land value itself. So on the third page of my brief, we have our land comparables. And they're generally in sort of the downtown area, with the exception of the Burroughs property. And we're looking at a range in size from 30,000 square feet up to the much closer to the subject, 98,000 square feet. So the subject is 95,000 square feet or 94,981 square feet specifically. But this is what I could retrieve on sort of the size range, as well as hoping to get it close to the reference date. And we're looking at a range in rates between 75.91 and 194.71. We're looking at the rate that we've used. Just going to confirm this here. It's $72.81 a square foot. So 72.81 multiplied by 94,981 brings us to the assessed value that we have here of $6,916,000. And I will acknowledge that some of these sales, the ones on Hargrave here, may relate to more, and Graham as well, to a specific purpose and a desired location. As well, I would argue that some of these locations may be more beneficial to the purchasers than this one. But we are looking at a value of $6,916,000 on the basis of land, with the understanding that they have secured funding. The project is going forward. Construction was scheduled to begin in 2024, with the first, basically now, I should say. And there are permits taken out, beginning that process basically now. And so the construction will be started before January 1st, 2025, which is the physical condition reference date, if you will, for the 2025 assessment. And the first phase of the construction is scheduled to be completed in 2026. So I would suggest that what we're looking at here is land with a nice facade on the exterior, with some usable structure on the inside that needs to undergo significant renovations. But funding has been secured to do that. And so at this time, we're just seeking for confirmation. So I would imagine that this will continue on up to the municipal board as well. So that's my presentation. Thank you.
Mr. Newman, any questions on the assessor's presentation?
Yes. Good morning, Mr. Fougere.
Good morning, Mark.
Go to page 4 and 5 of your brief, and 6. Those are the pages that have got rent comparables. Page 5 is an income workup. Page 6 is the income value summary. Are you telling us that all of that can be completely ignored because you're coming here today with a land value only?
Correct. It may be of academic interest to see what some larger spaces might go for on a retail basis, but outside of that curiosity, really no. It's having no effect on the value that we're proposing here.
Okay. So you've noted in your presentation that the property, the building has a heritage designation, correct?
Correct.
And that means it can't be demolished.
Correct.
All right. Page 3, your land comparables. At the time of sale, were each and every one of these comparables vacant land?
I don't believe every single one of them was. However, I can say that none of them were impeded by a building that existed with the heritage designation.
Let me ask my question again.
Sure.
Would you agree with me that these properties had no buildings on them at the time of sale?
So 360 Hargrave, no building. 245 Graham and 242 Hargrave, I would have to review that. Well, it does say surface parking lot, so I will go ahead and acknowledge that's the case. The Bannatyne, yeah, surface parking lot, yeah. The Burroughs property was vacant, and the Portage Avenue property was also vacant. So I agree with your premise.
Right. And so what that means is that a buyer of any one of these properties has the ability to develop the property with further development, whatever type of building they may choose to develop, correct?
Yeah, legally permissible, of course, but otherwise, yes.
Right. And you'd agree with me that any prospective buyer of the subject property has no ability to build a new and different building upon the subject land, correct?
Correct. They can renovate it significantly, and it's in fact a requirement to develop this property at all to do so. But the facade and a lot of the components of the building are required to remain.
So there is no way for a buyer, prospective buyer of this property to purchase this property to develop something else upon it. Agreed?
Well, I would say it's very, very limited. And I would say that the facade and the structure and many components are protected, and therefore the development potential is definitely limited. In terms of can they build something else? Depends on how you want to define that, but the structure is intact, and my understanding is that it's structurally sound and suitable for some development, but it's definitely confined to what would be allowed under the historic or heritage designation.
And so let me be clear, though. Any buyer of your comparables has essentially got a blank slate.
Correct.
Subject to zoning, they can build whatever they want to build there.
Correct.
Any prospective purchaser of the subject does not have a blank slate.
Correct.
Have you made any adjustments to the value of your comparables?
I have not.
And so the value of your comparables does not in any way take into account the fact that a buyer of the subject does not have a blank slate.
Correct.
You indicated that you've looked into this. Are you aware that I had lengthy discussions with more senior management at the city a year ago about this property and how it should be valued?
I'm not aware of your discussions with more senior management. I understand that this property has been under appeal previously. And so for that, I would be aware that you've been discussing the issues with this property with our department in general, but I'm not aware of the matter.
Not under appeal since it was transferred by the Bay, correct?
That would make sense, given the timeline, yeah.
Right. And you're aware that this property, because your brief on page 2 indicates there's no sales history for the property, but in fact, there is a sale of this property, correct?
I have not reviewed the transfer documents, but there has been the new owners of the property are the Southern Chiefs Organization Reconciliation Foundation, and the owners of the property before 2022 were the Bay.
Right.
In terms of whether or not that's a share sale or any of the details of the sale, I haven't had a chance to review it. It's not come up in our system, so I don't know if it's officially through land titles or what the nature of that is.
So I will tell you, it went through land titles. I will tell you that land titles, when they processed the transfer in February of 2023 with a sworn value of $1, wanted evidence to satisfy land titles that that was an appropriate value. And evidence was provided to land titles to let the transfer of land through at a sworn value of $1, because ultimately land transfer tax is payable based on the value, and essentially no land transfer tax was being paid, and that's why it went through at $1. So I'll just tell you that, and that would be part of my evidence as well. All right.
If I may, well, you mentioned part of your evidence that's not in your brief. Is that correct?
It's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Knight. Any questions for the assessor on his presentation?
So did this property actually sell for a big lump of sum of money, or it didn't?
Through the media articles that I've reviewed, this was donated or gifted as what they're describing as a act of reconciliation from the Hudson's Bay Company to the Southern Chiefs organization, Reconciliation Foundation, which is a charitable organization. With the understanding that it is of benefit to the party that they're donating it to.
Okay, so on other gifted properties in the city, do they get valued at the dollar limit, or do they get valued, a gifted property get valued at the actual value of the property for tax purposes?
Well, I haven't reviewed any other properties that have undergone a similar situation, especially with the heritage designation. Typically, if say a property is gifted from a family member to another family member, and there's essentially no money that's changed hands.
Transferred, yeah.
Yeah, we would look at what the market value would be. This is a complex property in that it will take upwards to $100 million to have this be a fully functioning, safe, up to code building for occupancy. As the Bay has been a going concern for so long, they were able to get by without those upgrades.
Okay. And that $100 million in order to fix it up, they've been granted some of that money?
Yeah, so I believe somewhere in the vicinity of 65 million from federal government, somewhere in the realm of 25 to 30 from the provincial government. I don't have those figures in front of me.
Yeah.
But needless to say, it is a project onto itself that has been would require a significant amount of investment capital into it. And in this case, the parties that are doing that are the taxpayers, the federal government and the provincial government. And collectively, the reason why they are doing that is that they see that there's value at this site to develop it. What that value may be, I think it's probably on the nominal side, and there's obviously a symbolic value as well as historic value, which is why the Heritage Winnipeg has designated it so.
Are there other properties in the city owned by Southern Chiefs Organization, Reconciliation Foundation, or another Chiefs organization that have a heritage property that is not valued?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mr. Thielen, any questions?
My questions have been answered, Mr. Chair.
I'm glad you clarified the value for the renovations, Mr. Fougere. I think you said it was 100,000 before. And
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes,
that was going to be my first question. Yeah.
somewhere definitely in the vicinity of 100 million. Yes.
Okay.
And as mentioned, the construction has already been begun, and my understanding is all this funding has been secured.
Just a curious type of question. You came up with a land value of 6,916. And I know you didn't actually go over the income approach that you have in your brief, but that also is the same number.
It's
Just,
actually
or is it the same number?
it's actually technically not. The number that you see at the bottom of the calculation is actually just
Oh, I see. Yeah, I see.
yeah,
Okay.
it's just overridden so that when the assessment went out, that it didn't go out at 9,967,000, which in and of itself, just to be clear, was using 25% vacancy, very low rental rates, and a high capitalization rate of 8.05. Basically, we made an attempt to say what would be the worst kind of poorest conditions that we can set the income for this property to be, and it still came out with a value of 9,967,000 because the property is so large. And just to mention, we're looking at a leasable area of 635,669 square feet. So it's very, very large building. So you can imagine that once all the renovations are done, the value would be significantly higher than where we're at now. So when we talk about $100 million in renovations, that would be something that would make sense given the scale of the project once completed.
Can I ask a further question?
Sure. Yeah. And
What
I
is-
have more questions, but
Okay,
yeah.
sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead first, yeah.
Just if it's completed, it becomes taxable then?
Well, I think there are some valid questions in terms of tax liability. I would be speculating at this point, which again is another part of why I would like to see confirmation and then have a greater period to collect evidence and discuss with people that might be more familiar with exemption and exemption status, because this project has been described as an act of reconciliation, and in that, I think the sort of scope of the project is greater than just say another apartment block, for example. I think a case could be made that it should receive special treatment. However, receiving, say, an exemption or grants or other things of that nature, or even attempting to include it in, say, a list of properties under the Municipal Assessment Act that are unaccessible due to their special nature. For example, True North, different buildings in the city have different tax liability that way. And I think that a case could be made for that. However, that is different than saying the building is not worth anything, that it's zero value.
Right.
But in this stage, what's there is a workable structure that needs to be undergone significant renovations.
Okay, so
And I, sorry, and I just to finish, and I think it's of value to the SCO because they can have that, small head start on the structure, and have the land gifted to them to then build it out so it fits their needs.
So just to reiterate, this building was gifted to the Southern Chiefs Organization Reconciliation Fund, and all the renovation funds are being gifted from the province and the feds. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think there's a variety of sort of clauses or conditions that are with some of those. Some of them are interest-free loans. Some of them are, grants and tax forgiveness, I believe.
Okay.
I have not dissected all of that information.
Okay.
But the idea is that they're getting heavily subsidized from the federal government, provincial government, which is, another reason why I would like to see this confirmed, because ultimately that means that we're essentially citizens, stakeholders, to an extent, with this donation and with these grants, that I would like to understand it fully, because I think we all have an interest in getting this right.
Okay, thank you.
I do have a further question, Mr. Chair.
Sure, yeah, and then we'll come back to me as well.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry,
No,
Mr. Chair.
that's fine. Fine.
Mr. Assessor, this property has a parking lot. Is the actual land value based on just the building, or is it based on the building and the parking lot?
Just the building. The parcel that's on the north side, that is the building itself of the bay. The parking lot to the rear is owned by a different entity.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the clarification. That's all my questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Yeah, I understand this for everybody here. I understand this is a very complicated situation, so I don't mind, circumventing the questioning process and make it a little bit more informal here. So was it gifted, really, or really was that just determined that the value was basically almost zero at the time because of the vast amount of renovations that were required for anybody to do anything with this building?
Yeah.
Was it officially deemed a gift?
I believe so. It certainly is presented that way. I'm unaware if they've received, for example, a charitable tax donation receipt for it. The bay. I know that they've donated it to a charity. In that the Southern Chiefs Organization for Reconciliation Foundation is listed on the Federal Registry of Charities. So their ownership is a nonprofit. It is not argued that it doesn't require significant renovations. But if you kind of flip the question a little bit and ask yourself, okay, if it's only a liability, and there's no value at all, why would anybody accept that as a donation? And so I would propose that there is nominal value, not $100 million in value, of course, but that there is value. Even in component parts of the building are historic and significant to the history of the Hudson's Bay Company, the intersection of the Hudson's Bay Company with the Indigenous people of Canada. It is, there is value there. And even so far as the land and the structure that will in part remain since it is structurally sound. There is some value there as well. And so I would just argue against the concept of putting $0 on this for the assessment.
Okay, you decided in putting a value on this that you would just value the land, and you say it has a structure on it that can't be touched. Why did you choose not to attach a value to that structure?
Well, because in its current condition, it can't be reoccupied. You know, it was occupied, I believe, up till 2021 or 2022 recently. But for a new tenant to go in, it needs to go undergo these renovations, and its current state, it's not allowed to be occupied. So we've gone ahead and gone basically for the lowest value in the way of the land value, to recognize that there is nominal value, some value. The exact nature of it, I'm sure, is highly subjective and highly subject to many variables. But the situation here is that the SEO has accepted the gift, and they are moving forward with a project to develop this site. And seeing it as land value, I think, is sort of the kind of starting point. It's sort of the, well, I was going to say it's sort of the zero that you begin to add to, but it's greater than zero, right?
Okay, so you mentioned
Sorry, sir, I think you're cutting out.
Oh, I think you mentioned a few times so far that you're requesting the confirmation on the basis that you know you expect more information to come out, and you expect it to be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board by either party. Just in terms of so the board understands what the ramifications are of that, if we were to do that now. During this process of appeals, is the owner burdened with the tax associated with the confirmed value?
I believe so. I don't know if in the intervening time a review of their tax liability can be done. I'm certainly not trying to give any opinion without any sort of review of how that might work or look in terms of an exemption. But say this goes forward to the municipal board and it takes some time to get it heard. It could be through discussions from the department with the applicant, that we can either look at either a settlement before it's heard, or we can look at the possibility of reviewing the liability status for the owners, which would, of course, potentially alleviate some of the tax burden.
Okay, I have no further questions, and then we can now move on to your presentation, Mr. Newman.
I think it's very important that we remember the reason why we're here. To determine value. What would the willing buyer pay to the willing seller at April 1 of 2023? That's it. That's all you have to determine. And Mr. Fougere, the ever reasonable Mr. Fougere, who's here as the representative of the department, he's not the author of what's unfolded here, but he's here as their representative. And he speaks eloquently, and he speaks about, well, yes, in response to the chair's question, yes, the tax burden continues. And he speaks about having it confirmed to look for information. And my answer to that simply is, I spoke to senior management at the department over a year ago. The deadline for appeals had passed for 2023 and 24 when I was first asked to look at this. I looked at the question of exemptions, you can be sure. I don't see one that's there available unless the legislature is going to write a new one for them. And the legislature could always do that in theory, but it hasn't been done yet. And so I invited the city to have discussions with me over a year ago, and nobody was interested. And I said to the city, much of what I'm going to say to you now. And I got the response, it's land value. But we can't get to land value because you can't take the building down. Doesn't matter, it's land value. So I say to you, as I said a few moments ago, remember what we are here to determine. What would somebody pay for what is there at April 1 of 2023? Now look, we've all grown up in this city, I assume. We all remember the Bay. Some of us probably went to the Paddle Wheel restaurant, perhaps to the Georgian Room restaurant that was also there. We know what was there. And if we continue to go downtown, which fewer and fewer people did, of course, over the years, we remember that the Paddle Wheel closed, the Georgian Room closed, floors 6 and 5 closed, then floors 4 and 3 closed. And at the end, when the Bay closed in November of 2020, they were only operating on the first and second floor. Why? Because the business model of these huge department stores didn't work. Simply didn't work. And people recognized that a long time ago because somebody had a plan at one point. University of Winnipeg, you're very nearby. You need space. Why don't you take the building? And they looked at it and they walked away. Why? Because it is an impossible building to redevelop. It's got such a huge footprint, the floor size on each of those floors. It's an impossible building to work with. In 2019, Cushman Wakefield, not Cushman Wakefield Winnipeg, but Cushman Wakefield on an international basis, did a valuation of all of the stores, the department stores that the Bay corporate group operated. And I saw this appraisal because it became a matter of public record. You could find it on the web. And the simple answer, said Cushman, is it has no value. Why? Because the cost of redeveloping it will be so ridiculously high. Nobody would do it, and it has zero value, said Cushman Wakefield. And so now we're in 2020, and the Bay has made the economic decision. We're closing it. We're just shutting it down completely. And what do they do with it? Because even though you've closed it, there's a tax bill to be paid year after year. You've got to insure the building year after year. You've got to heat the building year after year. You've got to have security on the building year after year. It's a liability. It's an encumbrance. Would any one of you, if somebody said to you, please take this property, I'll give it to you for $1, investigating that offer and learning that you might have to pay $200,000 or $300,000 a year to be the owner of the property, would you take it? Not in a million years, unless somebody gave you an envelope of cash along with it to cover those costs. So, God bless. There's a phrase I use called urban engineering. Somebody gets the idea, and they had the idea. Let's give it to the University of Winnipeg. University said, can't do it, not going there. Well, somebody got the idea. Here's a group of First Nations. Maybe we can give it to them. They're not going to take it unless somebody else says, here's an open check. Here's all the money you might ever need. You can take it because we'll bankroll everything you're going to do. That's not an economic transaction. That's not market value. That's urban and cultural engineering. That's what that is. And then everybody gets up, and Mr. Governor of the Hudson Bay Company, Richard Baker, gets up and says, act of reconciliation. Lovely language. Lovely language. It's economic salvation for him, but it's dressed up as reconciliation. So let's mince no words about this. And I'm being pretty direct in what I'm saying here. There's no economic basis for what has happened here whatsoever. And when Mr. Fougere says, let's confirm it and let it go to the board because we need to investigate some things. Again, I understand he's the guy, luckily or unluckily, who got this property on his list of properties for a given day. But there's a much bigger story behind this. And as I've said to you, I've had conversations with more senior management already. So the key is, what would the willing buyer pay at April 1 of 2023? I say that to you on page 2 of my brief. This transaction went through land titles on February 23, 2023. I don't understand why the assessor's brief doesn't record the sale. It went through land titles. It is not a share transaction. And as I've told you, when it went through land titles, the registrar of land titles said, we need to be satisfied about your sworn value. And they were ultimately satisfied because they let it go through for $1, which means no land transfer tax was paid. It's heritage designated. You see that on page 3 of my brief. I tell you some history of the property. You see that in the lower half of page 3 of my brief. None of that is in dispute. On page 4 of my brief, I tell you a little bit about the difficulties that large footprint department stores have had. Attempts to find alternate uses, transfer to the University of Winnipeg. They walk away. The Cushman appraisal in 2019, widely reported in the media, and I'll take you to an article reporting on it, but I won't take you out of order. So what do we do with this? What would somebody pay for it? And the assessor puts a land value on it. And again, I'm not being critical of Mr. Fougere. He's got his 6 comparables, every one of which was vacant land, every one of which was shovel ready for alternate form of development. And for that reason alone, every one of them is not a good comparable to the subject. Because the subject, land, is not shovel ready and will never be shovel ready unless somebody takes the heritage designation away and allows for demolition of the building. But even if they did that, the cost of demolishing 600,000 square feet of building, concrete, asbestos riddled, millions and millions and millions of dollars, far exceeding any land value, I'll suggest. So on page 5 of my brief, I speak to some of what I've just spoken to. And I say to you, the land value can't be unlocked. This thing cannot be valued on a land basis because nobody can buy the land. I recite the ongoing expenses. And I say to you that at $6.9 million of value, if the mill rate were $36, the taxes are $161,000 a year. And how many years till it gets to the municipal board? They are so far behind, and there's an ongoing burden to my client. So if the city wants to investigate something they've had ample opportunity to do, let them put a nominal value on it. Let them appeal your decision. And then the result will be what it'll be. But in the meanwhile, my client is burdened with the ongoing cost. So properties do occasionally have no value. And I give you a decision where the municipal board, and this was a case where the issue was, there's one of the overhead walkways that goes between 294 Portage, the Somerset building, and the arena. It's an accessible piece of property. And the question was, what should the value be? And so I've given you an excerpt on page 6 of my brief. And the board notes that the value is what the willing buyer would pay in the given reference year. And the board says, don't overlook this when we figure out what the value approach is going to be. And the two representatives, Lyle Rack for the city and Brad Boardroom for the owner, they went through a process and they concluded that on an income basis, there'd be a net operating income and a negative value. And the board essentially said, look, we don't have to quantify a negative value. It's sufficient if we set the value at $1. We're valuing this structure on what it would sell for in the market. And the answer is it won't sell. So we're going to put a value of it on it of $1. So now let me take you to some of the attachments. Page 8. So here's a story. There's a good picture of the bay on page 9. But here's the story about as the Southern Chiefs organization is going to redo the building, and on page 10, you see a rendering. Because one of the problems with this building is the footprint is so big. How do you get light into the building? And so the theory often floated has been, you got to construct an atrium through the core of the building. Sure, you can only imagine what that is going to cost. And you know, who knows how many years this project is going to take? It is starting with the best of intentions. Who knows how it's going to unfold? And all of us, as the years go by, can watch and wait for when and if the project finishes and what it becomes in the end. Because I don't know how long it's going to take. So if you jump to page 15, here is the CBC article from 2019, November of 2019, that reports on the Cushman-Wakefield valuation with a market value of 0. Noting that in order to bring it up to building code, it would cost $111 million. And so they said at the end of the day, there's no economic case for this building. And so at the end of the day, they put a 0 value on it. Page 18 is the report that was filed with the committee of the city of Winnipeg relating to the historic designation. That's the summary report. There's a much longer version of it as well. And pages 21 through 29, that is the municipal board decision that I referenced earlier in my brief. Now, I want to make some observations to you, because at the end of the day, well, there's lots to talk about, and this is interesting, but it's really a very simple question for you. How much would somebody pay on April 1 for this? So I just want to address some of the questions that were asked and some of the answers that were given. You know, Member Knight, you asked if it's gifted, is the value $1 or is it fair value? My answer to that in part would be, I don't think it matters. I think what matters is what's somebody going to pay for it at April 1 of 2023. I think that's what matters. On the issue of exemptions and liability, I've looked, I don't see one. Could the legislation be amended at some point? Maybe, but I don't see it there. So confirming isn't going to do anything for us in terms of discussions. The parking lot is separately owned, separately assessed, separately owned. It has not been owned by the Bay for decades. It's been owned by a separate party.
Right.
And, you know, Mr. Fougere said that we went for the lowest value and therefore we went for land value. That's not the lowest value. That's a value that's artificial, I would say respectfully, because you can't get to land value. Nobody would buy that. I come back to the core point I've made. Nobody would buy this. And what has happened with Southern Chiefs and what they are proposing to do is a form of what I have called urban and cultural engineering. It's not a reflection of the market. So I say to you, ultimately, you should fix the value at a nominal dollar. Don't burden my client with the ongoing taxes for many, many, many years while this thing plays out. And that's my submission to you, and I'm open to questions.
Mr. Fougere, do you have any questions on the applicant's presentation, please?
Sure. So you've mentioned the 2019 Cushman Wakefield appraisal. And I think you've suggested that you've looked at it.
I have in the past.
Okay. Do you recall if there's more than one sort of value perspective? So for example, you know, what it might be worth to the Hudson's Bay Company as a going concern of them continuing to operate their business there with their declining sales and their continued upgrades to the building. Or what it might be worth if it for dark value if it goes vacant versus a single tenant or multi-tenant. Have you looked at, do you recall if the appraisal goes to alternate scenarios to value?
So what the appraisal did is it, first of all, it determined a market value. It didn't determine a going concern value, it determined a market value.
Do you recall what that market value is?
Yes, 0. And how it got there, it started by doing a highest and best use analysis. And it concluded that the highest and best use was not the present use as a single occupant, 600,000 square foot department store. It determined that the highest and best use potential would be to redevelop it into components that could be occupied by multiple tenants. And it determined that the cost of doing that relative to the economic return didn't work, and that's why it had a value of 0.
Okay, well,
and I had nothing to do with this store at that time or the property, but as you all know, this is the field I work in, and so I'm curious when I see media stories like that, and I went hunting for the appraisal, and I was able to find it online, because to me, it was a very interesting read. It's a very interesting case study of what you do with some of these big, old properties and how they evolve over time and what you do with them. And that's why I searched it out and read it, and that's why I remember it as I do.
okay. So have you received permission from the person who did the appraisal to include it as verbal evidence or reference it through the media articles?
I don't think I need their permission when it's available to me on the web through a public forum. And I don't think I need it when the CBC has reported on it. But no, I don't have their permission because I didn't seek it out because it was available publicly.
Okay. With that being said, might it not be in the public's best interest to discuss that appraisal openly and have panel members have review of it and have me be able to ask questions on your interpretation of it?
Mr. Fougere, the task of the board and the department is to determine value at April 1 of 2023. What Cushman Wakefield says at a given point in time may or may not carry much weight ultimately, but we have to take a fresh look at it and come at it independently. In 2019, the Bay Store was still open, albeit on limited floors. By the time we get to 23, it's been closed for 2.5 years completely. So I don't think there's much value. And again, I understand what you're trying to do here is get a confirmation on the encouragement to the panel. This will create an opportunity for discussion. Wonderful. We can have lots of discussion. As I've said to you, I tried to have discussion and it didn't get me anywhere. And I appreciate maybe if I'd been discussing with you, maybe it might have been different. But having said that, ultimately, it's not about an opportunity for discussion. It's about the board making a decision as to what they think that willing buyer would have paid at April 1 of 23.
So does the appraisal from 2019 help inform your understanding of market value for this building?
Well, it certainly helped me understand the property, the nature of the property. And again, this wasn't the first public reporting about this property. When the University of Winnipeg was looking at it, it was a matter of public record. Sandy Schindelman was apparently part of the committee that looked at potential alternative uses for this property. So this has been a difficult property that has been the subject of significant public discussion and consideration with a view to finding another way to use it, because it was recognized for some period of time that the Bay was downsizing. And what are we going to do with this building? So if the department wants to study and look, they can do that as much as they want. Again, I tried to have these discussions, as I said to you, and there didn't seem to be much interest at the time.
Okay. I think those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Steelan, your questions, please, any?
No questions, Mr. Chair. My questions have all been answered.
Any questions for the applicant?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
sorry. I'm just curious about the building at the corner of Portage and Main, and I don't even know if I can ask this question. It was a Bank of Montreal building, and now it's with
Manitoba Métis Federation.
thank you. Was there a value given to that building when it was sold? Or about,
I don't know the detail of that
Yeah.
transaction. I simply know that, again, the bank owned it at one time. It was their headquarters.
Mhm.
If you've ever been in the building, it's an unbelievably beautiful, spectacular.
I have been in
building.
there. Yeah, I do know that, but I know that it was given to a native organization.
Yeah.
And I just don't know if it's got a value on it, because this would be sort of similar. The building's been given. And I was wondering if anybody needs a value. That was all. That's my only question.
If I may, just to say that I don't know that the value or the building was given. I think it was actually sold.
Oh, okay.
Just in case that helps.
That would help. Was it sold for $1 though?
No, with a sale price that you might expect. It's
Okay.
like I don't know if it's market value, but it's in the neighborhood of millions of dollars.
Yeah, I was looking for the address. I couldn't find the address, so that's where I was going with that. Okay. All right, thank you.
Mr. Nimitz, if this building didn't have all those restrictions attached to it in terms of the amount of money to sink into it if you bought it, and you just have this nice big property with this big building on it that somebody can do something with, how much do you think it would pay for it?
Well, that's an impossibly difficult question to answer. Because you don't have buildings in the city of Winnipeg. I mean, the biggest office buildings at Portage and Main, the office towers, they are not more square footage than this building. But the footprint, of course, is completely different. The layout of those buildings is completely different. So how do you take a building built in the 20s and how do I figure out for you how much somebody would pay? And the answer is, it's all about what they could do with it. How much would it cost to get them there? And how much can they get by way of a return on their investment at the end of the day? And my simplistic answer to you is, I don't think they'd pay anything for it. Because that's why the University of Winnipeg walked away. Because it's just so expensive to redo. That people, and it's so risky that investors, they won't do it. The willing buyer in the open market won't do it.
Okay, anything in summation, Mr. Fougere?
Can I just ask one more question?
Absolutely, yeah.
So whatever value we pick, if either one of you don't like it, you'll appeal it to the Manitoba board?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And I find that interesting that the city has predetermined that whatever you do, if they don't like the number, they're going to the board. I find that interesting, but I'll leave it there.
Okay, thank you.
For clarity, what we would be seeking is a chance to gather more information, and we can always withdraw an appeal, but if we don't have an appeal in place, we can't go forward.
Right. Thank you.
Mr. Newman, are you choosing not to answer that question?
My answer, I guess, would be that if there's a reasonable value put on it at the end of the day, then we would not appeal.
Okay. Yes, so we're gonna go to the summations. Is there any other questions from panel members?
No, sorry.
No questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to summations then. We could go on and on with this building, I guess. We have to come to a close somehow. Mr. Fougere, anything in summary?
Yeah, and I think to your point that you've just said, that we could go on and on with discussions on this property. I think that speaks to why this would be a good candidate to go forward to the municipal board. Ultimately, that's my position, is that it is deserving. The taxpayers of Canada, of Manitoba, of Winnipeg are deserving of having a full discussion of this property. And I would also suggest that at the end of the day, what is here is good land, a good structure that needs extremely large sums of money to develop fully. However, it's sort of like building blocks. You got to start at the bottom and say that's the land that you own that has a certain amount of value. You have a structure that's another amount of value. To get the rest of the value, which would be into the realm of hundreds of millions of dollars, you would need to put in hundreds of millions of dollars of value. But the basis of redevelopment has to start at land and has to start with a structure, both of which by the applicant's evidence appear to be there. When I say the applicant's evidence, it is quoted to say that in one of the news articles provided that the structure of the building is quote unquote fine. So that's why it's the beginning of a project for the charitable organization of the Southern Chiefs organization. That's why they're starting it here. It's not because they can't and that it's worth nothing. It's because there is a start. There's the very small seed of a start to a project here. And we were trying to recognize that it is just a seed in terms of applying the land value to it. But I agree, it is a large topic and a complex one. And we're not trying to value it as a fully operating department store. We're trying to look at it where it is now. And I would suggest that if we want to discuss appraised values, that we have a chance to review the appraisals that are cited. But anyways, sorry, that's my summation.
Okay. Mr. Newman, anything in summation?
I didn't plan to make a summation because frankly, you've heard my points, but really, Mr. Fougere continues to say to you that we need an opportunity to review and talk. And yet, as I've said to you, there seemed to be no interest in that over a year ago. The core question is, what is somebody going to pay? You can't get to land value. The comparables are no good because they were all vacant. The subject is not vacant. Just focus on the question, what would somebody pay for this property at April 1 of 23? That's my summation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. That then concludes this item number 2, 450 Portage Avenue. Thank you very much to Mr. Fougere and Mr. Newman for your presentations.
Good morning to all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thanks.
Have a great day, everybody.
You
Bye.
too. Nice
Sure.
weekend.
Thank you. You as well.
And we have heard all the items scheduled at this hearing, and it is now adjourned.
Great. Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Take care.
You too. Have a great weekend.